Good morning, everybody. Lee Brower here, and welcome to this week's edition of Meaningful Monday. Take me out to the ball game. Seventh inning stretch. You know, the last time I sang Take Me Out to the Ball Game was not in a baseball park. It was a couple of years ago. My uncle had passed away, and he was a professional baseball player for part of his adult life. And in the funeral, it was a stoic funeral, kind of dry, really. I mean, but the only thing that was great is the Marines came in and covered up his urn with the U.S. flag, and that was very patriotic and touched us. Ceremonies were, we were there to honor him and to feel the spirit, and we did, and it was okay, and it was moving along nicely, and it concluded, and the priests were getting ready to leave with the casket or urn, and a city worker, came out of the back and came into the church, came up to the front, asked the priest if he could say something, and stood up and started talking. And he pulled something out of his pocket and started reading it, and you could tell he was very, very nervous. And he just said, "You know what? I thought I was the only one that loved I didn't think there was another person on the planet that could love baseball as much as I love baseball. But Floyd Brower used to come by, I would see him, and we would sit down and talk. And I finally found somebody that actually loved baseball more than me. And he read a story that was printed by a guy by the name of, I had to ask him afterwards, but it was Tom Ageloff, if I remember the name right, back like in 2012. But he compared baseball to life and made a great comparison. For you think like baseball, for example, like life, has no clock. We don't know when the game's going to end. We hope it might end at 9 innings, but there's no guarantee that it's going to end. We don't know what time it's going to end. It could go on for inning and inning, just like life. Talked about balls and strikes. You know, we all get a chance to hit. And we get a certain amount of bats and a certain amount of balls and strikes. And it's interesting that if you can still miss the ball 70% of the time and end up in the Baseball Hall of Fame, right? So it's not our failure. I mean, it's not, you know, we may have more failures in life than we have successes, and we can still end up in God's Hall of Fame. So, you know, I mean, so we just learn to overcome them. He talked about individuals versus teams. He talked about sacrifices, sacrifice fly, bunt, sacrifice bunts. He talked about umpires and how they can make bad calls and good calls, but like life, we have bad calls and we have good calls in life, but that's all part of what life is. And then he talked about control. He says you don't score, well, you can't score in baseball when you have control of the ball. You score in baseball when your opponent has control of the ball. And in life, it's much the same way. We might feel that everybody's against us. Obstacles are coming in different directions, so we start to lay blame on that. But just like in baseball, it's those that know how to overcome those obstacles when somebody else has control that they turn up actually becoming winners. So that whole comparison of it. Now, when he was done talking, he folded up the paper and went and sat down, and everybody was like, wow, that was beautiful. And we were touched. And so as the priest picked up the urn and started walking out, the organist, on her own accord, started to play Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Spontaneously. We're all standing there, and pretty soon somebody starts to sing, and pretty soon we all started singing Take Me Out to the Ball Game. The emotion, rampant tears, we are all brought together in that moment. Now think about the last time you were at a baseball game. Think about that seventh inning stretch. You know, they say the seventh inning stretch started in 1910 with President William Howard Taft. You know, he's a guy, he's a president, weighed 350 pounds, 6'2", and this is his first baseball game. It was opening day. He threw out the pitch, and he went out and sat in these tough chairs. And at that weight, that chair was hurting him. He stood up at the middle of the seventh inning, and everybody thought the president was leaving. So all the fans stood up. But he just stood up and stretched. Oh, he stretched. So everybody stretched. And that's how we ended up with the seventh inning stretch. That was 1910. It wasn't until years later, and really Harry Carey from the Chicago Cubs that really got it going, where he added the song, Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Now, after 9/11, George Bush added the song, said, why don't we play God Bless America? Other parks have put it, things, have we been at the Red Sox park when Sweet Caroline was playing? You know, but think about in that moment, Think about you're there in the audience. It doesn't matter if you can carry a tune. It doesn't matter if you're alto or soprano or bass. It doesn't matter what religion you are. It doesn't matter what team you're rooting for. It doesn't matter what political party you belong to. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter. We are all together. We are all fans together with different backgrounds singing together at the same time. And didn't you just love it? Perhaps it's time for us to have a seventh inning stretch. Maybe we need a seventh inning stretch where regardless of our differences, we come together and like singing the, take me out to the ball game, we're finding what are those things that are in common with us. Where it doesn't matter what our background is. What are those things that we are doing right? We live in one of the greatest countries, if not the greatest country on the planet. What's right about it? Let's celebrate that. Perhaps it's time for us to introduce some seventh inning stretches in our home, maybe in our business. But how can we add seventh inning stretches to our life and our communities? I want you to think about it. Ask yourself this week, if you're looking at this with your company, if you're there by yourself, with your family, ask yourself, how can we create a seventh inning stretch ritual where we think about nothing but what we have in common and find a way to celebrate it? Wouldn't that be fun? Would you be willing to do that and share it? Why not share this video with as many people? See if we can't get more people having seventh inning stretches, shall we? Have a meaningful week. Thank you for being here. I look forward to talking to you next week. Bye-bye.